A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another live session of GETI Talk. I have somebody who's a research scholar, and she has done her completed her education from the University of Cambridge and London University. So she's deep into research, and her experience in education goes back to 35 years. She's currently the principal of Salvan Public School in Delhi. So, ma'am, I know that the topic that you have chosen is something which is, actually needed in education. That is recognition of learning styles. A traditional education doesn't actually emphasize on it. It's more on instruction and teaching in the class. But this topic that you have chosen is actually very interesting, especially in this session, in this time when pandemic and all, and there is blended learning, flipped learning, all these things are coming into the picture. So thank you, ma'am, for joining us, and thank you for choosing this topic, and thank you once again for joining the disruptive education movement started by Dr. Sunita Gandhi. So here it is, over to you.
Thanks, Shilpi, for this introduction. What I would like to say at the outset is that, as you mentioned, pandemic has changed a lot of things, particularly the exceptional cases that we are now seeing. So many students who were used to studying in the presence of the teacher in the classroom are now studying online. And there is a huge difference between online teaching, blended teaching, the actual physical classroom teaching, but the world over, this is one educational disruption which has happened spontaneously and automatically. And how well most of us have taken to this. So we today will understand how we can identify the learning styles of students, which actually help us to have better learning outcomes and for us to have more fair assessment of the child's learning. So I begin by talking about the learning styles, and all these learning style theories which I'm talking about have been given by leading psychologists, leading educationists and pedagogues, and they can be imbibed and internalized in our education system as well. So I hope everybody is able to see my screen.
Yes, ma'am, we all can see your screen. You can go ahead.
All right. So here I begin by telling you that what exactly is the need for us to talk about learning styles and why it is so important. So, ladies and gentlemen, everybody learns in his own peculiar way. We don't have one way of learning. We don't have one system in which we learn. Some of us are very visual learners. Some of us are oral learners. And some of us are kinesthetic learners. And these are the terms which we are already aware of. That many of the students you've seen, that unless and until they do something, they do an experiment, they do an activity, they don't really take the learning home. On the other hand, there are students who are sitting at one place absolutely quiet and they're just reading something. And with that reading, how much they are able to learn, how much they're able to understand. So it is the word, the written word, which speaks to them. And then we then come to those who listen to people, and once they listen to them, they know that whatever was being told to them, they have understood it. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are many people who have been giving us, with examples, these theories that how we can identify various learning abilities and various learning methodologies. So, Shilpi, would you be able to share my presentation with the audience?
I'll do that, ma'am. I think the one that you shared has just gone off screen.
No, it's there. So here I'm talking about the learning style.
Yes.
So the term learning styles actually refers to the understanding that every student learns differently, as I said in the beginning. So let us see how a student absorbs, processes, comprehends, and retains information. For that, I begin with Fleming's VARK theory, which is an acronym, stands for visual, audio, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. So here the reference has been taken from Fleming and Mills and Fleming and Baum. The VARK learning style inventory categorizes students into one of the four categories based on how they prefer to receive and deliver information. Students who are capable of using more than one learning style equally well are categorized as multimodal learners. So this is VARK. And look at this visual. Since I'm a geographer, I know that as a kid, I was absolutely fascinated with maps and pictures and graphs, diagrams. They all spoke to me. I could visualize things. I could see the pictures of mountains, valleys, waterfalls, and cascades, and I could imagine how a glacial topography would look like. So I knew, but of course, I didn't know that I was a visual learner, but I knew one thing, that when I see things, I learn. And this is what our teachers do now. With greater information at their behest and with greater learning and researching ability, the teachers are able to know that what kind of learner our students are. As I said, many of us are oral learners, listening to a discussion, listening to music, storytelling, speaking. You might have seen, ladies and gentlemen, oftentimes when we say to a child that, okay, let's hear a story. Once upon a time. The moment we say once upon a time, you can see the child's eyes whitening and the curious expression on his face because those words mean something to the child. So that is something to identify in an oral learner. And then we have the read and write learners. And that, as Shilpi, you said in the beginning, most of us, at least in our country and many more countries as well, we are more into reading and writing. So written instruction, manuals, reports, PowerPoint, writing list, essays and words, all these are now a second nature to all of us because that is how we've been learning all our lives in traditional schools. But now, as in today's time, we don't have that kind of conservative system of education. So reading and writing is not the only way. And of course, there's another kinesthetic learning where you practice, where you do things, role play, where your body uses itself for learning. So the expressions, the gestures, the use of hands, running, jumping around, actual field trips, excursions. And through this presentation, I'll often give examples of geography, which has been my subject. So I know that a true geographer will learn much more in a real field trip as compared to what the child or what the student learns in the class. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the Kolb's learning styles. Kolb's learning styles are one of the best known and widely used learning styles theories. Psychologist David Kolb first outlined his theory of learning styles in 1984. He believed that our individual learning styles emerged due to our genetics, life experiences, and the demands of our current environment. In addition to describing 4 different learning styles, Kolb also developed a theory of experiential learning and a learning style inventory. And the learning style described by him are based on 2 major dimensions: active, reflective, abstract, concrete. Let's take them up one by one. This experiential learning cycle is typically represented by 4-stage learning cycles in which the learner touches all the possible bases of a child. Concrete experience in which the child actually does something. He has a real first-hand experience. A reflective observation. There are students who see, do, and observe something and they reflect on the experience. And that reflection stays with them for a much, much longer time. As I say, learning that sticks. And then there are learners who are abstract conceptualizers. And what do? From various experiences, they come to their own conclusions. They infer, they decipher, they analyze, they assimilate from anything which is abstract to a very concrete learning. And then we have active experimentation, where they plan and try out what they're learning. And that gives rise to new learning. And this is exactly what new learning is. When everything you've done, you've analyzed, you've interpreted, you've synthesized, you use it for a new possible way of doing things. And that is active experimentation. Shouldn't we all be aspiring for that experimentation? Now, let us see who is a learner, who's a converger. People with this learning style have dominant abilities in the areas of abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. They're highly skilled in the practical application of ideas. They tend to do best in situations where there's a single best solution or answer to a problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, focus on this. They do best in situations where there's a single best solution or answer to a problem, which may not be the case in all subjects. You may have one answer in mathematics, you may have one answer in science, in chemistry, in biology, in physics, but do you have one answer in language? Do you interpret a poem in one way or multifarious ways, depending on what has been your reflection about the topic? And then there are divergent learners. Divergers' dominant abilities lie in the areas of concrete experience and reflective observation, which means essentially the opposite strengths of the converger. People with this learning style are good at seeing the big picture, organizing small bits of information into a meaningful whole. And divergers tend to be very emotional, very creative, enjoy brainstorming to come up with new ideas. No wonder artists, musicians, counselors, and people with a strong interest in the fine arts, humanities, and liberal arts tend to have this learning style. Ladies and gentlemen, now we turn to an assimilator. Those who are skilled in the areas of abstract conceptualization and reflective observation. Understanding and creating theoretical models is their greatest strength. They tend to be more interested in abstract ideas than in people, but they are not greatly concerned with the practical application of theories. A lot of philosophers, ladies and gentlemen, would be great assimilators. Individuals who work in mathematics and basic sciences also tend to have this type of learning style. They enjoy work that involves planning and researching. The accommodator. People with this learning style are strongest in concrete experiences and active experimentation. This style is basically the opposite of the assimilator style. Accommodators are doers. They enjoy performing experiments and they carry out their plans in the real world. So, out of these four learning styles, accommodators tend to be the greatest risk takers. They're good at thinking on their feet and they change their plans spontaneously in response to new information. When solving problems, they typically use the try and error approach. People with this learning style often work in technical fields or in the action-oriented jobs such as sales and marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, now I talk about the Honey and Mumford learning styles. Honey and Mumford learning styles were developed by Peter Honey and Alan Mumford in 1986. Their work is inspired from and built upon Kolb's learning style models. And they produced their own learning style questionnaire because it was found that Kolb's LSI learning style inventory had very low validity with managers. Therefore, instead of asking people directly how they learn, as Kolb's LSI does, Honey and Mumford gave a questionnaire that probes general behavioral tendencies. The rationale behind this is that most people have never consciously considered how they really learn. And to be an effective learner, individuals must know about their learning styles or preferences and find ways to learn using these methods. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the diagram showing you Honey and Mumford's learning styles. You can see the 4 dimensions: concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. And can you see that who are the activists? They work between what ranges? The reflectors, who are they? With the concrete experience and reflective observation. The activists, who are reflective as well as they have abstract conceptualization as well. And then they are very highly pragmatic, very rational people with active experimentation and abstract conceptualization. Now I take you to a wonderful philosophy of learning, which also emphasizes a lot on learning styles. The Italy's Reggio Emilia approach, which is actually an early education or preschool philosophy that uses 4 key principles to focus on a child's natural development. It is both child-centered and child-directed. So, ladies and gentlemen, please pay attention here. It's both child-centered and child-directed. How much of our learning in our schools is directed by child? Leave alone directed by child, sometimes the child doesn't even have a voice to decide for himself how he is going to learn. Taking the philosophy that learning must make sense to the student, even the youngest student, in order to be effective and meaningful. A child's point of view is completely respected, and the student is encouraged to follow their own educational path. It is believed that a child's driving sense of curiosity, along with their inherent potential, will foster an interest in learning, allowing them to learn and succeed in long term. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to, for a few seconds, ponder over this, that Reggio Emilia approach was basically an early education of preschool philosophy. But here again, the child had the control of his own learning rather than the facilitator controlling the pathway to learning. That is something which makes it such a unique philosophy. And what does it say? Look at the 4 principles. Children must have some say over what they learn. Additionally, the senses play a big role in the learning process. Children engage with their senses to help them learn and fully process something. Children are encouraged to interact with other children and explore the world through material items and relationships. They're also encouraged to always express themselves and be given infinite means and opportunities to do so. I'd like you to think about this wonderful poem on which the Reggio Emilia philosophy is based and which almost sums up the philosophy. No way the 100 is there. This is something which touches your heart. The child is made of 100, 100 languages, 100 hands, 100 thoughts, 100 ways of thinking, of playing, of speaking. 100, always 100 ways of listening, of marveling, of loving. 100 joys, for singing and understanding. 100 worlds, to discover 100 worlds, to invent 100 worlds, to dream. The child has 100 languages and 100 more, but they steal 99. Now, who are these people who steal those 99 languages, those 99 hands? It is, unfortunately, the educational system, which has only one way of teaching, only one way of learning, only one way of facilitating. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand various learning styles. There may be 100, there may be thousands, there would be millions, depending upon how many children we are talking about. That brings me to the theory of multiple intelligence, which was first proposed by Howard Gardner in his 1983's seminal book, Frames of Mind, where he broadens the definition of intelligence and outlines several distinct types of intellectual competencies. Gardner developed a series of 8 inclusion criteria while evaluating each candidate intelligence that was based on a variety of scientific disciplines. He writes that we may all have these intelligences, but our profile of these intelligences may differ individually based on genetics or experience. So, could I now draw your attention to these multiple intelligences as given to us by Howard Gardner? The intrapersonal, where you understand yourself, the typical reflective learner, the naturalist who dabbles with nature, who feels one with nature, the spatial learner who sees and maps his world in 3D, the musical, to whom music makes a lot of sense, logical reasoning, where deductive reasoning, detecting patterns, and logical thinking come to the forefront. The interpersonal, the people's person, the child who likes to interact with the world around him, talk to them, meet with them, play with them, bodily kinesthetic, where a child, a learner, uses one's body in a highly differentiated and very skilled ways. Linguistic, the child who's a master of the spoken and written language. And can we say that there is one intelligence in each one of us, or we are having multiple intelligences at a time? And the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, there's enough research in the world to say that you could have a number of intelligences in you. It's just that your facilitator, your teacher, has to know that. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I come to the key takeaways of this program. So observe your child in action. Look at what the child says through the facial expressions, the body language. Does the child like to touch things, objects, people to learn? Consider your child's interest. Is he an auditory learner, a kinesthetic learner, or a visual learner? And see how your child solves problems. Mumbling to themselves? May ask you to help talk. Use your eyes to solve problems. Excel at matching games. Tend to keep a neat and tidy room. Use hands for counting. You've seen all this happening around you, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to become more aware of them. And for identifying other clues, we make cautious assumptions based on genetics. By that I mean, isn't it very short-sighted to say that the girls learn like this, the boys learn like this, or the girls are more into humanities and the boys are more into engineering and sciences? These are assumptions which we have to be very careful while making. It is only doing gender stereotypes, which we should avoid at every cost. So let us talk to teachers and people who interact with our children regularly. And who are they? The parents, the pediatricians, the extended family, the counselor, who knows the child. What I think as a teacher may be completely contrary to what the parents think of their child. And we've seen it happening around us. We've seen it playing in the school all the time. The extended family has another opinion about the child. So we need to understand what a child is from a certain perspective. Ask your child to take multiple learning style quizzes, multiple choice tests about your kids' habits and behaviors. Acting upon your family, match your child's learning with your teaching style. Find programs that cater to your child's strengths. Teach your child to study based on their learning style. Don't completely limit your child to a single learning style. And that is the harm sometimes we cause in very traditional schools where there's a single learning and single teaching style. That is something which we need to avoid. So, ladies and gentlemen, every child has a different learning style and pace. Each child is unique, not only capable of learning, but also capable of succeeding. So with this, I come to an end of this topic, and I'm sure that this would have led you to some thinking on these lines. And let us see if you have any questions, which I'll be happy to.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I mean, it was such a crisp and precise presentation, but we were able to get everything. There is a question, yes, ma'am, and it is coming from one of our principals from Kanpur. Her name is Mrs. Harmeet Kaur, and she says that do children who have poor learning capacities follow some special method?
As the question says that a poor learning capacity, what I would like to suggest on this account is that every child, irrespective of whatever way he learns, he is gifted with a certain ability that we have to find out. If the child is not good at reading and retaining information and learning, then there must be some other way. Maybe the child is a doer. Maybe the child is a reflective learner. So we have to identify. I would suggest to my colleague that the teachers need to sit and work with the child to identify the best way which appeals to the child's learning.
Right.
Any other questions, Shelby?
Yes, ma'am. This would be just one of our last questions. Recognition of learning styles of children. It's easy if the child is expressive, as you said, facial expression or some bodily expressions. But there are some children who are like static. You know, they come in the class, they're very quiet. You don't even know what's going on with them. It's very passive, you know, and not even expressions are there on their faces, no bodily movements like that. They don't even move during sports. You know, they don't seem to be interested in anything, neither sports nor mathematics, nothing. So how do we then, you know, kind of motivate them or get to understand them, their learning style?
Thanks, Shilpi. This is a question which not only you, but a lot of teachers in my school and the other schools would be grappling with. There are students. Some of them can be seen from my own experience. They are some introvert students, and they often do not open up to the teacher or to even their friends in the class. They may not sometimes open up to their own siblings. So what we again need to do is, as I said, there is no one way of identifying the learning style. You have to understand as a teacher, as a facilitator, that all the people who know anything about the child, who deals with the child, which could be parents, siblings, relatives, family, we need to have a 360-degree view of the child and then find out what is it that makes the child excited. Because Shilpi, in my opinion, even the autistic children have some kind of interest which is extraordinary. So it is very hard to believe that there would ever be a child who would not have a certain learning style. We just have to be able to identify that by having a 360-degree perspective of the child.
One last question, ma'am, one of our viewers. Is there any specific way she's asking or method how to identify every child's learning style when there is a group of 30 to 40 children in a class?
I'm sure this is not going to be easy. And I would not even say it is easy. Of course not. It is not easy, but possible. For instance, this Reggio Emilia technique that I was talking about, it, the Italian now, teaching early learners, there sometimes you may have just about 10 children under your guidance. And there could be, if there are 20 children, there would be an assistant teacher. Most of our schools cannot afford that, isn't it? Indian schools are anyway overcrowded classrooms, and teachers' ratio is unfavorable. So what do? Does it stop us from bringing the best practices of education from the world over to our classroom? No, it does not. Because what then we have to do, Shilpi, we have to bring those practices in our system in such a way that each lesson plan that we have, each learning task, each learning activity that we have in the class addresses at least one different dimension of the child. If your lesson is so balanced that it has an experiment, it has an activity, it has some music, it has some physical dance or activity for the learner, I'm sure that every child will relate to it. So don't worry about the overcrowded class. My school also has not less than 40 students in any class. But we try and tell children, teachers, that please bring in a number of fresh ideas and perspectives into your everyday lesson plan.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. I hope they all are happy with the answers. And thank you for taking out time and being here. And, it was actually my luck that I was able to host you in place of Dr. Zainab. And we are looking
You're
forward
welcome.
to having another session with you. We would like you to, pick up the topic of assessment, ma'am. We would like your views on that when we
Of
again
course,
meet together.
I would
Thank you.
love to.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.